We are live, episode 42 of Catch Encounter. Thank you to everybody at Big Mouth Radio and YouTube for sticking with us. As always, Nibs, what's good, my boy?
What's happening, baby? I'm just out here trying not to burn up in this desert heat, but I'm not trying to brag, but it was like a cool little 85 today. Out here. How you living out there, man? That East Coast weather. How's it working for you?
Well, I have the opposite problem. I've been working outdoors in the cold, which I also did today. And now I'm here doing this show with my friend Nibs. And for our amazing chat members, we always appreciate you guys when you leave your comments. You're the third co-host. I know there's probably people who saw the thumbnail, saw the title, and they're waiting for us to talk about Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua. But I think we should start off with this past weekend. We had a major star at the super middleweight division in Diego Pacheco, going back to his youth coach, right? He's no longer with David Benavidez, or Jose Benavidez Sr., I should say. Winning a very, very, very close fight with Kevin Sajo. He gets put down, I believe, for the first time in his career. And according to him, for the first time in his life. It was, I think, a better opponent than expected. I think it was a relatively flat performance. And I think finding out about the loss of the grandmother figure in his life after the fact is clearly a factor. But what do you make of his performance, Nibs, and how do you kind of assemble like what parts of that were the main reason for this fight being this way?
Man, first and foremost, thank you to Big Mouth and our YouTube fans. You guys are the reason we get to get up and do this, and all the time. And thank you to Dakota, who's really a lot more intricate into this than I am. So you know what I mean. I just want to give everybody their flowers where they're due. Shout out again to the whole ICR family. We appreciate y'all. What I want to say, bro, is I think that anytime fighters have these personal issues that go on, when it's somebody close, like a grandmother, grandfather, uncle, aunt, dad, mom, sister, brother, somebody within your circle, even if it's a best friend that you consider family, right? I think there should be pause on whether or not you should continue with that fight. We saw with Daniel Jacobs, when he was going through what he was going through. Also, just so happened to turn out he had cancer to boot, right? So, you look at that and it was a devastating loss. Pacheco was almost a victim of a devastating loss because let's be really clear, he was in trouble, when that left hook landed. And thankfully for him, his opponent didn't capitalize. His opponent didn't follow up the way you would expect a killer to do so. He allowed himself to get smothered. He allowed himself to get tied up. And he really kind of let Pacheco off the hook. In my opinion, I think he had him hurt several times, and again, just continued to fall in and let Pacheco get away with it. So I think the right opponent, and he was allowed to get away with a dub. In my opinion, I thought it was a draw at best. After watching it, and I watched it twice just to make sure I wasn't being harsh, but I thought the scorecards were very generous.
I thought the 115, 112 was in like the realm of reality. Maybe you see a round or two different here or there. I thought that was a relatively fair scorecard. And I got to give it to Diego on this one, man. And we'll get into the rest of the fight. But I just want to bring up the fact that he saved his career in the 11th round. Yeah. That little volley he had in the 11th round, it was an incredible combination. Sajo had won a couple of rounds before that, had dropped him in the 8th, I believe. And that was like a must make something special happen moment. And he did it. And he kind of just like pulled this combination out of the worst possible performance he could be having without getting knocked out or getting just straight up beaten up.
Right.
And then he wins the 12th also. And for me, that was the difference in the fight, was that he was able to pull out those last two rounds. I actually thought Sajo, he was better than I expected, right? You see pressure fighters sometimes, you don't know like at what level that's going to really be a factor. But he was very effective at cutting distance. He was very effective at smothering Diego, sometimes smothering himself. But to be able to do that for 12 rounds against a guy that talented, it obviously says something about his level. And I think, like you said, when fighters have personal issues, whether they have to not take the fight altogether or it affects their performance, like this is not a video game, right? Like things happen in guys' lives, and it is inevitably going to have an impact on the fight. There's just no way around that. And I think sometimes I think there's times where it can be multiple things. Like I think there's probably something going somewhat wrong in most training camps at a certain level, whether it's an injury, it's a family problem, like whatever, there's something happening. But I think when you get a couple going all at once, or it's a tragedy that happens right before the fight, there's just no way it's not going to impact, the fighter's performance. It's unavoidable.
I think it's, yeah, he was again and against a guy who was undefeated at, up until that fight, 26-0. Diego was 24-0 coming in to the night. So, you look at record wise, you think, okay, this guy's got a solid record. He's got a solid record against decent competition to boot, right? Like he doesn't have a whole bunch of cab drivers. He's probably got a good 50-50 mix on who he's beaten. And you think, okay, and then, he gets into the ring and he looks like, one of those chiseled Greek god miniature dolls, and you're thinking, okay, this might actually be a decent scrap. And again, I think if Diego probably wasn't dealing with his issues, his own issues outside of the boxing ring, he probably wins this fight easily, if not gets his own stoppage. But he definitely looked like he was in his head. He definitely looked like he was not really wanting to be in the ring, that night, and it showed. And that's one of those things, bro, where you have to respect the sport of boxing, or it will get its due. You know what I'm saying? It's not playing any games with you. And I understand, hey, look, you got to get your bag, you've got to pay your team, you've been training, this, that, and the third. But when you are not ready, let somebody know. I'm not ready for this. You know what I'm saying? This is, we need to hit the reset button, come back, because this could have been disastrous. Let's say, when Sergio lands that left hook, he follows up correctly, knocks him down again, because he definitely could have. We're having a whole different conversation, right? So, or if he's in there with just a guy who's got a little bit more skill after that, not because let's face it, once you get up there with these guys that are killers, and there are killers in his division, right? They knock you down, bro. That's probably going to be the end of the fight for you pretty quickly. So I would just say that you have to give boxing its respect, because it's not a game you play. It's a sport you play. It's you got to get in there and get right. Hats off to him, like you said, for gathering himself. A part of the reason he was able to get through is because of his own talent and knowing, hey, look, he did tie up. He was getting his head off the line just enough, to get those punches to not have the full effect going forward. But very shaky performance. Everybody has one. I hope that he learns from it, gets his shit together. Because again, big fan. So I'm hoping this is just that one off. He comes back next time and we forget about this altogether.
And I think enough of Diego and his talent that I think that's very possible. But it does make me think, right? They talked about somebody that Kevin Saggio actually beat the amateurs, Christian Mbili. I think about the volume of punches from Mbili on any given fight, which Saggio wasn't throwing. Now, part of that was his strategy where he was really going body to body to try to make Diego uncomfortable. But like you said, after he got clipped, we know how Mbili follows up. He's ruthless. He's brutal. He's physical. He's unrelenting. And to see Diego in a fight like this not have the snap, not be able to really get control of the range of the fight at all, the footwork wasn't great. Like the criticism of Diego before this fight wasn't that he's beatable, it's that he was boring because he won rounds.
Yeah.
He stayed behind a jab. He was very sharp. He wasn't necessarily willing to engage maybe the way some fans might want. The argument was never about he's beatable or ineffective. It's that he doesn't go outside of himself, which kind of brings me to my next point. Why don't we see the snap? Why don't we see the feet? Why don't we see the reaction time? Well, we talk about it seemingly every fucking week, but I also saw a guy with a dry back for 5 rounds who's 6'4" that is still now 24 years old, choking himself down to super middleweight. And it just seems like maybe his body has also evolved. You know, this is a guy who went pro and he was like 19 years old fighting at this weight class. He's coming into his man strength. And, you know, a tragedy on top of a bad weight cut is a horrible recipe for a tough performance. And he showed the character of a fighter, you know, to win it in those last 2 rounds. But if you're just talking X's and O's and strategy, if I see a dry back like that for 5 rounds, I have to assume certain things.
I mean, look, like you said, bro, we talk about this. It seems like
Every fucking
episode,
week, bro.
every episode we're talking about this, and it gets to a point where like, hey, I'd like to not talk about it, but at the same time, it seems like every week somebody is going through what we're talking about, right? And again, I just keep going back to you to got to say, guys, look, you look at some of the greatest fighters that ever did it. They stayed around a certain weight class, right? These was a weight class that they could comfortably walk around in when they weren't fighting. You know what I mean? And yes, does can that put you at a disadvantage sometimes as far as weight, size and this, that, and the third? Yeah, of course it can, but it also keeps you a lot fresher, right? It doesn't affect your health as much as some of these other guys. You know, like you said, some of the things these dudes are going through to lose the weight, to tip that scale just south of a certain number is damn near killing them. I mean, we've said this over and over and over again. You've seen numerous times guys get to the scale and they're passing out. Guys passing out before they get to the, going to the having to go to the hospital immediately after or before, because they don't have any fluids in their body. Like it's ridiculous, bro. And I think it needs to stop. I think there needs to be, if there was some type of regulation, I wish that boxing would implement, would be that, because these guys are killing themselves to make a certain weight. I think that money be damned, you should be fighting at a more comfortable weight for you to make and live through on a regular basis.
I'll tell you what, too, man. Having seen it in person, the last few years of covering the sport, like it gave me almost like a whole new appreciation for how bad the issue is. Because you see things in person at weigh-ins and press con, because the press conference is the last day, that
Yeah.
they have to make that weight. Sometimes it's that they look so much better at the press conference, and then the next day they look like they're dying. So it all depends. Sometimes it looks like they've been struggling for 2 days, and it's getting to them. You know what I mean? Like I've had well-known fighters that I've done interviews with that get off the scale and then drink so much water that they can't stop hiccuping. Like you see little things that you wouldn't know. Like a guy walking by you that you saw 2 weeks ago and their eyes are like sunken in. Like
Yeah.
that unnatural. It's not natural. It's not conducive to athletic performance. It's this very old school thing that I just don't think it really applies anymore. And I think part of what keeps guys in it is once they start getting ranked, they're afraid to give that ranking up.
Yeah.
I'm about to get that mandatory or what, especially for a guy like, Diego, who's right here knocking on the door. I think it feels like you're jumping into a new pool, or that you have to start over, if you've already established position.
Bro, I remember they used to have, for some of you guys who are a little bit up there in age, get your Googles on. For everybody else, they used to have Friday night fights, and they had them down here at the casinos here in Tucson. And there was an event that somebody I knew was boxing on, and so we show up early. We've got backstage access. We're going, and I see, these guys, the day before, which is day before fight, so they're doing their weigh-ins, and the team is carrying the boxer to the scale.
Yeah.
And I thought, this was some kind of traditional thing. It's these Mexican cats. No, they're dragging him because he can't walk on his own to the scale. Now he gets on the scale, he does all the posing and the pictures and the flexing. The second the camera stop, he flumps to the ground, right? And here comes the team. They pick him back up and drag him away. And somebody, like, as soon as they get there, somebody's stuffing a nutrition bar in his mouth. Somebody else is setting him up with water. They had this guy in the back with an IV, bro. You know what I'm saying? And it was just liquids, nothing, no medicine. And it was just liquids. That's how bad it was. And I said, nah, man. He ate so much at the fighter's meal that night, he ended up getting food poisoning and then had to cancel because
Yeah.
he ate so much. You know what I'm saying? Because it was literally like his body was ravaging itself. So he was just in there. And I'm talking, bro, they kept putting plates in front of him. He's just, you know what I mean? It got to a point where somebody told him, hey, look, you got to stop. And then I guess later that night, he just they had to take him to the hospital. He couldn't hold anything down. But it's just, I'm like, let's get away from that. If it gets to a point where you have to carry your fighter to the scale, the fight needs to be called off, bro. You know what I mean?
And the last point I'll make on this, there's certain fighters, right, that maybe don't have the best discipline, that when they miss weight or you hear they had a bad weight cut, you don't feel quite as bad for, because you saw them in between fights, you watch them put on 30 pounds, 50 pounds, whatever. And so you're like, yeah, I bet you did have a bad weight cut. Then there's guys like Diego where I know he's disciplined, bro. Like, you can just see it. He's been consistent throughout his career. He's at least for me, he's never disappointed. I know people didn't really like the McCumbee fight, but I thought that it was incredibly effective, and I felt like he basically won, 10, 11 of the 12 rounds against a good contender. Yeah. And you get a dominant win, you go home. So for me, he's pretty much always delivered. So to see a guy struggle that much, and it's not to take anything away from Sajo, but we were watching Diego struggle. We were seeing it in his face. We were seeing it in the corner, and it just became unavoidable, that he was struggling. So when you see a disciplined fighter, when you see a fighter where you kind of know what you're getting with them, and they look flat, or they look dry, or they're having a bad performance, it's not, to me, it's not a discipline issue. It's your body has changed.
I challenge any and all fighters who think it can't be done to follow the Bernard Hopkins playbook, right? Bernard Hopkins for over 20 years, right? And as he got older, right, had probably one of the most disciplined regimens in the world when it came to making sure he was on weight and in well condition, right? Like, you never saw Bernard struggling on a scale. It never happened, just never once, right? On purpose or not. Even at the end, right? Bernard was always on weight. He always looked ready, right? And there are very few handful of guys you can say, and look at him now. Bernard walks around about the same weight. He looks like he can still, strap up and get in there. And it's because you don't lose that discipline. We were talking about him, a while back. Chop Corley. Look at that guy. He's in his 50s down there, and is still making weight. Come on, bro. Come on. And so it can be done. It can be done right. And it can be done at a high level. I just think that, nowadays these kids, like you said, that it's the money, it's the, the pressure from the promoter, etc. Right? Sometimes you just have to take care of yourself, man, and bet on yourself. Hey, let me fight at the right weight. I guarantee you, I can make more money. And again, it's been paying off. Look at Devin Haney. This dude's at 147, looking like a whole new fucking man. You know what I'm saying?
But I also think,
he's
like,
a whole new guy.
I also think, right, we've been talking for weeks about guys that changed weight and had great performances, right? So the evidence is there for that also. But I got to be honest, it ties into some of what we were talking about before we went on air today. The fewer the opportunities are, I think the worse the weight cutting is getting because it's like, if I don't take this, what's the next thing that comes? I think there's a little bit more take what you can get going on sometimes too.
But you can do that too, even, right? Like, even if, okay, let's say you are a guy who should be fighting at 150, but I'm gonna try to get down to 135 because that's where the money is. That's where I could, you know, my size and weight, I could probably do the best too, right? Like, I have the best chance at this weight to win a championship. There's a way to get nutrition in there. There's a way to get the workout in there. There's a way to get where it's year round, where it's
Yep.
okay, yeah, you'll be able to make that 135. It's gonna be a bitch, but it's not gonna be nearly as bad as you trying to do it the old school way, in the trash can suit on a bike in the sauna. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's retarded. Let's get it right. Let's get the food right. Let's get a nutritionist in there. Let's get somebody who's gonna do the right workout plan to where when fight night comes, you're having to lose maybe 2 or 3 pounds as opposed to 15,
Yep.
the night before. So I think even that can be done correctly. The problem is you got a lot of these guys just doing it the old school way or not doing it correctly, and then they're draining themselves. There are plenty of guys who fought at weights they probably shouldn't have been fighting at, but they were able to do it comfortably too because they invested in their bodies. They paid, to have a
Yeah.
nutritionist, paid to have a specific type of trainer outside of boxing, right? That's another thing too, is sometimes a lot of these guys forget, hey, you still need physical training that isn't boxing related. You know what I'm saying? To get peak performance. So I think a lot of guys forget that, and you just see them focusing on the boxing part, and it gets lost a little bit.
Well, and here comes the segue of the week, bro. We saw Sky Nicholson move down to 122 because she hadn't been killing herself to make 126. It's one of the few examples of a fighter moving down and being effective. I would say her and Nonito Donaire are probably the best examples. But that's part of the choices that you have when you're not killing yourself to make weight, right? When you're fighting somewhere that's a little more natural to you, maybe an opportunity comes up at a weight lower or something, if something else comes up and you're able to say yes and not have it kill you. And in Scott Nicholson's case, it makes you even better. This performance against, I believe her name was Luna, was a former champion in her own right, was a little bit
Yeah,
more like featherweight Sky Nicholson, right? It was a little more technical, a little more tactical, but I think it was also the best opponent she's been in with at this weight. And listen, bro, I think she looked like $1 million in this one.
I mean, I thought she won it hands down, front to back. I didn't think it was competitive, but it wasn't. It was still a blowout on my card. As far as the rounds went, I thought Luna didn't back down. She did come to fight. She was outclassed. I think Sky Nicholson is just that much better than her, and it showed. And then again, when you consider she's a two-weight champion herself, so it's not like she was fighting some scrub. I just think that again, Sky Nicholson has picked the right weight class, and I think she should stay there. I think why not? You know what I mean? When it looks that good,
Listen, she said
so
she can comfortably make 118 pounds. Why not? Why not go down and get a fight with
and I
Trinity
believe it.
Johnson? I believe it. The dream fight for me, it would be for her and Ellie Scottney to fight next. I know Scottney has another fight lined up, but I thought that Julian Luna, the first couple of rounds, she had some good timing. She knew how to kind of make Sky uncomfortable, and Sky just made the basic adjustment. I'm going to go on the back foot. I'm going to go behind a jab. I'm going to check hook her every single time she even thinks about coming towards me. That right hand is going to be waiting for her anytime she breaks the distance, or I'm going to hold her. I'm not going to feel bad. You don't want to see that. Like, I just thought it was a very, very sharp performance on her part. And yeah, I really think that her versus Ellie Scottney could be one of the best fights in women's boxing right now.
And again, I always like to bring these up because people understand, just for reference, man. Luna was 28-4, 28-4-1, I believe. Her four losses were all in championship fights, right? She's losing to the best fighters, and in a women's division at 28-4, you know what I'm saying? And as a two-weight champion, that's like being an undefeated fighter in the male side, right? Because she's having to fight everybody, right? You know what I mean? There's no fight she gets to take off. So the fact that she's even taken a Sky Nicholson fight lets you know who the kind of fighter that she is. Again, like I said, I think she did the best that she could. I think Sky Nicholson at the lower weights, though, man, it's hard to pick against her, bro. Like when she's not gonna be knocking people out. To your point, she's not gonna be putting on these one punch knockout shows, but she's gonna box the shit out of people. So if you love just real pure good boxing, Sky Nicholson's a good watch, man. I liked it.
And by the way, I do think her power has gotten a little better at 122. But if we're talking about punching power, bro, we got to talk about Tito Mercado. That was the performance of the night for me, knocking out Antonio Moran, who's been a reliable contender through the years, coming off a win over Mike-Juan Williams, who I've been telling everybody to watch for a couple of years. I was shocked at the results of that fight. So it was the best win of his career. Tito Mercado, I just haven't heard the level of excitement around him that I've heard around some of his peers and some of the guys in his weight neighborhood or in his age neighborhood, his class of prospects. But this guy's kind of sensational, bro. Like he knows what he's doing. He knows how to maintain his range. Everything's right at the end of his punches, at the peak of their power. He's very accurate. The boy is not getting hit. Right? Like he's smart in there. Like what's not to like, bro? Why are people not getting more excited about this kid?
I don't know. 18-0, 17 knockouts, bro. 18-0, 17 knockouts. Let me repeat that. 18-0, 17 knockouts. He's prime time, baby.
And he's making it look a little bit too, right? Like he can fucking yap.
I love it. When you can talk that shit and back it up. You know what I'm saying? Against really good competition. We're talking about a guy who was 31-7, but when he got in the ring with Mercado, you know what I'm saying? Again, he's got 7 losses, but again, those 7 losses are to legit competition.
And we're not talking about his career best win, the best win.
Right. We're not talking about a guy with 7 losses to bums. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about a guy who's 38 fights into his career, fighting a guy who's 17-0. You're thinking he's going to give a good account of himself, right? Oh, we're going to finally see what the young man is really got. And then he goes in there and he makes this shit look easy, and we're all sitting there going, well, damn, next, go ahead and maybe this dude needs to be fighting for a belt. Maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, but damn it. Hey, bro, it's another one of those guys where, hey, I wouldn't be mad if he gets a title shot next, or at least a really good, next step up level fight. I think he's got all the stuff we wanted Berlanga to have. You know what I'm saying? Like his knockouts aren't just against the cab drivers. His knockouts are against dudes we thought were contenders. You know what I'm saying? And his defense is 1,000% better. The one thing obviously we haven't found out yet is what his chin can do. What he hasn't had that tested yet. But I think he's got all the stuff we hoped Berlanga was going to be. So, hey,
he's
man,
doing it so smart, bro. Like I think of him more. I mean, I think he's actually might be just like a smarter fighter, but I think of him more as like a Subriel Matias in terms of his punching ability, because Berlanga would hit guys once good, they'd get hurt, and then you kind of beat up on them and it was over. Whereas Subriel, it's like this long-term ass whooping that's like very patient, and it kind of sneaks up on you. Like he hurts Moran in the first round and doesn't go crazy trying to get him out of there, right? He kind of stays within himself. He lets it go 4 or 5 rounds. He gives us 4 or 5 rounds of beautiful boxing and then finishes with a great knockout. There's just a depth, I think, to what he's doing that Berlanga never offered us. But I
I
think it's
think it's because he can do both. That's what
yeah,
excites me.
yeah.
You know what I mean? He can do the Subriel Matias thing, but he can also do the Berlin. Like he can do either or. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's a way he throws that kind of reminds me of Barrera, like the way he kind of whips it, and it's very free,
Yeah,
like he's
yeah.
turning his whole body into it. There's just something very natural and fluid about him, and I don't see any reason why he wouldn't give just about anybody a hard time at 140 right now.
Man, sign me up, bro. Sign me up. Because again, 140 is getting even more exciting. And I know usually you don't say that when things start to clear out as far as guys leaving and this, that, and the third. But that's to me when it gets more exciting because now we're trying to it's gonna fizzle out. We're there's gonna be a guy soon, right? I think there's gonna be a guy at 140 really soon. And why not him? Why not? Yeah, young, brash, and can back it up. Come on, bro. Sign me up, man. And it's when it reminds me a little bit. They're completely different fighters, but I remember when Rougarou was coming up, right? And kind of out of nowhere, everybody was like, "Who the fuck is this kid from New Orleans?" And then I think he gets his first fight on like ESPN, and then he gets an undercard on our pay per view, and it's like, whoa, you know, overnight. You know what I mean? I kind of feel like this was that fight for him where people were like, "Whoa!" And now we're going to start to see him get in there. It reminds me of that time when he was coming up. It was literally like an overnight. Like he had been boxing for a while, but then he had that one fight where we were all like, "Okay, wait a minute." And then the ball rolled real fast. I think this is going to happen for him. At least I hope so. That would be the wish, and I think he deserves it, bro.
Couldn't agree more. What did you think of Joe Cordina's decision over Gabe Flores? I would argue great performance from either guy. Ultimately, Cordina able to just be more physical, more experienced, land the harder, more accurate punches, and kind of edge it out. But what did you make of this fight?
God bless Gabriel Flores, bro. You know, longtime fan, even through his losses, and I liked this performance out of him, even in his loss. He got tagged a couple of times. I thought, Cordina could have got him out of there, and he really pulled his heart into this one, and was just fuck it. He was ready to go out on his shield. And I thought there were a couple of times where Coutinho really could have got him out of there. But I thought it was a really good action fight. I liked um I'll be honest with you though, it was another one of those really close fights. I thought Cordina eked it out, but I thought it was a really good close fight.
I think for me, I just didn't see the reaction time from Cordina that I feel like we've seen in the past. I didn't feel like he was as sharp. I just didn't think it was his best outing. And I think the thing for Gabriel is, our school of thought is that, losing is not the end of the world because it isn't.
Yeah.
But I just don't see the growth, man. I feel like at any time I've seen him in the last couple of years, I'm watching the same guy. And I know that he's a local favorite, and I know that he was a young phenom of sorts, but he's just not growing, man. He's not getting better. He's not. I just feel like I think the punishment that he took in the Venado fight, mixed with the fact that like he's in that position, right, where it's like he has to be the man, even if he's not the man. He's raising his hand at the end of the fight. He knows he didn't win that fight. You know what I mean? He got brutally
Yeah.
beaten down in the last couple of rounds. He's taken a lot of punishment. I'm not seeing where it's going, and I feel like if he doesn't get some other people on his team and some real boxing people in his life, I just don't know where else it goes other than being a regional star.
I think we're past that point, if I'm being honest. And I think we were past that point when he did fight Giovanni. I think after that is when that move should have been made, right? If you're going to switch it, if you're going to try to resurrect, if you're going to try to change things, that was the point where it should have happened, and it didn't. And then one of kind of the worst things happened. He went on a streak, right? He hadn't lost a fight up until this one here, um, and I want to say that he was able to do it doing what he used to do, right? He was getting away with stuff again. Well, guess what happens? When you go to step up again, you know, and the other guy knows the playbook, you know,
Mhm.
and that's what it was. Even with all of Cordina's, let's say he did lose a step, he was still 3 or 4 steps ahead of of Gabriel in this
Yeah.
fight, and it shouldn't be, right? This was your, like you said, this was your home game. You you were punting a lot more than you were scoring.
And it's an older champion that's not really having their best night that you are hitting on the way in, right? But it's like even rounds where he'd do like a minute and a half of some decent boxing, he just gets hit too clean, man. Like he either loses focus or he doesn't. And I got to be honest. And listen, I'm not out. Who am I to tell that man what to do with his life? But when I see a 25-year-old guy with legs like that, that worries me, bro. He's kind of got old guy legs.
Yeah, I mean he's definitely, his chin is very suspect at to be nice. You know what I'm saying? And we saw that. I mean, I remember, in the Giovanni fight, people were like, "Whoa, wait a minute." You know, people were expecting him to do what was done to him, in that fight. I think that what up, Felix? You know what I'm saying? Appreciate you.
My guy.
Shout out to ITR, our guy. I need some more t-shirts, Felix. Um, anyway, um, hoodies preferably. Hoodies. Um, with that being said, bro, I think he's still 27. What, 27-3 or 4
Yeah.
now? Was this 4 losses or 3?
3.
3. Okay, so he's 27-3. You know what I mean? That's still 30 fights in. You've only got 3 losses. He's still got a chance to turn it around and have a decent career. I think it's going to be about the only way I see him getting another shot is it's going to be timing, right? Like he's going to have to get the Cambosis timing. You know what I mean? He's going to have to get a guy who's got a strap, who's willing to do and able to do the things that he's that'll make him look good in the fight. Um, and has pillows in his gloves, because anybody with a decent punch can put him on his
Well,
ass.
he's not physical enough to make you not want to come forward. There's nothing that he's doing offensively that makes Cordina go, hold on, maybe I need to change my approach here. He's walking right to him, right. And it just, until there's some kind of, there was so much promise behind him, but it's like sometimes like the child star or the child singer, like they go through puberty and it doesn't really work anymore. And it feels like that with Gabriel sometimes, bro. He hasn't grown into that man body, that man strength. It just hasn't developed the way that you'd want. And it's, if anything, it's regressed. So I like the kid. I've enjoyed his career very much. Obviously, our outlet has covered him pretty extensively in the past. He was a very talented young man. I just hope that he's able to, make some of the changes, that might lead him to success.
I think that, and I hate putting this on a guy, but I think that unless there is a change, he's a gatekeeper at this point. You know what I'm saying? And that's about as good as his career is going to get, is gatekeeper
Yeah, but
status.
he's going to have to get better defense to be a gatekeeper, bro. That's that. You know what I mean?
That's the sad part, right? When you think about it, like and let me be very clear. I'm not talking shit about gatekeepers. There are some
Antonio
very
Moran's a gatekeeper. That's a hell of
yeah,
a gatekeeper, right? But
right,
Gabriel Rosado was a gatekeeper, but part of how he stayed a gatekeeper was he was defensively competent. You know what I
right.
mean?
I mean, hell, we were just talking about Anthony Yard's a gatekeeper. You know what I'm saying? And put your prospect in there with him if you want to at this point. You know what I'm saying? And figure out just how easy it is, quote unquote, to beat a gatekeeper. But there are some gatekeepers where it's like, hey, they're one punch away from being a champion. I think Gabriel Flores is a gatekeeper for the second level. He's not. He's not. We're not talking gatekeepers for the top level. I think he's the gatekeeper for the second level, bro. I think he's a B level gatekeeper, and it saddens me to say that because I really, coming up, I was a huge fan, just like we all were. But that Giovanni fight that put a whole new thing, and it put a whole new light on him. I was like, oh, he's got some shit that he needs to fix, and I haven't, like you said, I haven't seen it fixed.
Nibs, we got 20 minutes left. We got a thumbnail that has Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua. We got to get to it, even though I'll be brutally honest, as a matchup, as a boxing fight, me as a boxing guy, I wasn't watching Jake Paul prank videos on Vine in 2015. I had shit to do. But what do you make of this shit, bub? I think everyone pretty much knows what we're going to say. But what do you think about all this?
Look, man. I will say this. I think that this is by and large better than the Tank Davis debacle. Thank God that didn't actually happen, for a number of reasons. But and I still will criticize anybody who even thought about sanctioning that fight. Um, considering the massive difference between the two fighters, not just skill wise, but I mean, again, we say it all the time. There's weight classes for a reason. So thankfully, that didn't happen. Um, Look, I can't blame. Really, when you, as much as I want to complain about it, I can't blame either guy, right? I can't blame Jake Paul for calling out one of the biggest names in boxing in Anthony Joshua, right? Because he couldn't get tanked. So he calls out the other big name on the other side of things, an actual heavyweight who's going to put up numbers, right? That's ultimately what this game is about: is putting up numbers. What's going to sell the most tickets? What's going to make the most money? So you go after Anthony Joshua, and considering that he is in himself a heavyweight and wants to be considered a real fighter, hey man, you know what? The fact that you're taking this fight, I do have to respect that somewhat, because the
Big
fact
time.
that you're even actually going to get in the ring with Anthony Joshua, okay, you know. However, guys, this is still Anthony fucking Joshua, right? Like, the best heavyweight in the division, if not one of the best of all time, Usyk is telling you this is not going to be in any way, shape, form, or fashion good for Jake Paul. And this is a guy who beat Anthony Joshua twice. And he's telling you, hey, no, man, I don't see a way you beat him.
He's telling you he's strong, he's physical, he fucking hits hard. Felix is saying, is Anthony Joshua looking past him? I saw him and Tyson Fury agreed to a date in March or so. Well, I'd bet he is looking past him a little bit. And I will say I don't like the Turkey Al Sheikh school of double booking fights. I think it curses fighters. I don't like anything about it. So I don't think that's a good look for Joshua at all. I don't really think anything about the fight is a good look for Joshua. It's really a win-win for Jake, because there's obvious that it takes balls to do this, right? Any of the other fights that he's had prior to this, I would say most, if not everything, has been in his favor, and now nothing's in his favor. So you have to give him credit for that. There's no way around it. It takes a lot of fucking balls, and not every kid on the internet, can get himself into an Anthony Joshua fight. That being said, his last three opponents are Mike Perry, Mike Tyson, and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. And that doesn't tell me anything about how he does against a top 7 heavyweight. He hasn't had to check the boxes that other fighters have to check. And I hear the argument that, oh, this is what all prospects do. It's not, bro. Like, not all prospects get to have 5 fights against guys who have never had a pro fight, to start their careers. Not everybody gets to fight a blown up middleweight at cruiserweight and then gets into, the biggest possible pain. A 40-year-old alcoholic, by the way, and a cokehead, and then gets to go to fight one of the most famous fighters and heavyweights in the world. And while I respect the balls, it's just like, he's only here because of the numbers part of it. It's not because of what he's earned in the ring. And that's always been the frustrating part for me with Jake Paul. It's not that he exists, it's that it gets conflated with world-class boxing, because since the beginning, when he was fighting guys with hip replacements, he was saying, I want to fight Canelo Alvarez. And I think people got it twisted that it's all the same thing, and it's not the same thing. But now we're going to see those two very different things in the ring together. And I, at least for me, I feel like part of why he's taking this fight is it's like, I don't even think he knows the levels. You know what I mean? And I was talking about this the other day. It's like, I'm a decent little pickup basketball player, right? And if I got hot one day and then you went and watched the Knicks and they were really bad, you might go, oh, I don't know, you fucking, and it's just not true, bro. There's levels to this shit. But I think that to some extent, because he's gotten the big paydays off of fighting guys with hip replacements and basketball players and men in their 50s and 60s and alcoholics, and that got him the big money. I think he really does believe this shit now.
Here's where Jake Paul and his followers are delusional, right? Everything you just said is correct, right? It's one thing to finally actually beat a guy who was a champion and was at some point a ranked fighter recently in Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. But we're talking about a guy who hasn't taken boxing seriously in the last 5-10 years, right? He hasn't taken the sport that he's naturally gifted at seriously. And let's be really clear, had Jake Paul in some trouble at the end of that fight.
I mean, that last 3 rounds is so revealing, because it's like, we know Chavez is a head case. That was my whole argument going into the fight, is like, listen, he might just get in there and not let his hands go, which is exactly what happened for 7 rounds. And then I think he remembered he was in a fight, or he started to give a shit, or his ego kicked in or something. And he went to town on Jake Paul for a couple rounds there. And that was good enough for Chavez, right? He was happy with that. He was up on the ropes with his hands in the air like he did something, right? I think that's a little more indicative of what the rest of Jake's fights would look like if they were against ranked people that weren't head cases, or that weren't in their 40s, or that were fighting at their natural weight, right? Like, the best of Chavez Jr. was 40 pounds below where they fought 10 years ago. So,
I mean, you talk about being a good pickup basketball player. He fought a retired basketball player who had never even thought about getting into the ring. We all know about the Nate Robinson debacle and how that went, right? And it's like, oh well, now all of a sudden you think he's ready to fight actual boxers, and then the actual boxers that he's fought. Yeah, I mean he's fought 3. Chavez and the other 2 cab drivers that he's fought, right?
Listen, Ryan Borland was an okay fighter.
If you take Fury, Tommy Fury,
Ryan Borland was a decent fighter at super middleweight like 12 years ago. That's probably the best. That's probably the most qualified guy outside of Chavez.
And let's face it, Tommy Fury is a reality TV show guy, right? I don't even know if Tommy Fury's fought since, Jake.
He's not on the cards we watch, right? He's not on the cards you and I watch. He's not on.
I think he may have had like 1 fight since then, but I think he's just riding the celebrity train, right? He's more of a celebrity boxer than an actual boxer, but you got to give him credit. He's from a fighting family, so we'll give you that one. But you lost that one. You know what I'm saying? And it's probably because Tommy Fury actually took the fight seriously, right? You're fighting a guy who is 3 fights removed from fighting for the heavyweight championship of the world, right? And gave the champion everything he could handle for 12 rounds, my guy. This is the guy, again, and Alexander Usyk is the guy that is universally recognized as the best heavyweight, period. Hands down, there's no questions about it. He'd be Why? Because he's beaten everybody else that you could
Yeah.
consider the guy. And first time, yeah, Anthony Joshua wasn't prepared for how slick of a boxer Usyk was, lost the blowout. Second time around, son of a bitch, he almost pulled it off, right?
I
We're
think though
talking
that
about this is the guy you want to fight? Okay.
but I think that anybody that likes the matchup would make the argument that that was a better version of Joshua, that he's been stopped by Dubois now, that that fight killed the, whatever confidence was left. And there might be a little bit of truth to that. I just don't know that Jake Paul can do anything about it. And the truth be told, I'm a little worried about his safety and his health. And I know that it's not something people want to say because everyone's a company man trying to sell you something, but I do think it's a little worrying. Like what is the qualifier for fighting in a world-class fight then? Like, can somebody, because here's the thing, almost any celebrity is more well known than the top 10 of the heavyweight division. So at what point does it then become acceptable for a world-class fighter like Anthony Joshua to go, yeah, I'm gonna fight, I'm gonna fight Travis Kelce. I'm gonna fight somebody who's never fought a day in their life. I'm gonna fight Jalen Brunson because it'll sell more, than if I fight Agit Kabayel.
I mean, it's to your point. It's a win-win for Jake because nobody's expecting him to really. Nobody realistically thinks he's going to win this fight, except for Felix, who's like delusional and might have been drinking when he made that prediction anyway. But I think that Jake Paul, if he even were to get a knockdown some kind of way, or to land a significant punch, would be a victory for him. You know what I mean? I mean,
Totally. That's why I say it's a win-win, because if he wins, he turns the whole sport upside down. I'm a fucking asshole, right? Like, and if he loses,
yeah,
if he
you and me
loses,
both.
but if he loses, listen, I've been getting the fucking training wheels for 7 years, and I got in with a top guy, and it's a win-win for Jake because it does take balls to do what he's doing. And by the way, I do think he's a decent little puncher, but I don't know what the fuck. I don't know anything about him as a fighter, bro. I really don't. Do you know what style he fights in? I don't know what fucking style he fights in. We haven't seen him in the fights that would show that.
He fights in the bully style. He fights guys he can bully.
Does he kind of putzed around Mike Tyson and flicked the jet,
I mean, look, to be honest with you, I wouldn't mind seeing him fight in Ngannou, because Ngannou got in there against Anthony Joshua, right? And I thought Ngannou, who had previously boxed before as well, had somewhat of a chance. You know what I'm saying? I thought he had somewhat of a. He comes from a combat sport. He's been, he's taken punches before with smaller gloves. You think he's got a shot to at least go some rounds, right? And Anthony Joshua, and let's be really clear, Francis Ngannou hits a hell of a lot harder than Jake Paul probably ever will. You know what I'm saying? That is a very large man.
But again, on the flip side, everyone's going to treat Jake like he needs training wheels, but the kid has 12 pro fights now. So he has a wealth of experience more in a pro boxing ring than Ngannou does.
But fighting YouTubers, ex NBA players, and the retirement league is a completely different fight than Anthony fucking Joshua. You know what I'm saying? And let's be clear, getting knocked out by Dubois is still not something to, oh, he got knocked out by Dubois. Well, guess what? He almost knocked Dubois out in that fight too. So
as he was getting knocked out, he had the man hurt.
Right. So we're talking about heavyweights here, guys. We're talking about skilled professional heavyweights. They almost knocked each other out. He got the last laugh, Dubois. You know what I mean? That's ultimately what happened in that fight. Let's say they rematch. Do we think it happened? The same thing happens? Who knows? You know what I mean? So I will say this: Anthony Joshua is way better in rematches than he is in the first fights when he does lose. So I think he has learned the lesson, though. I think he did learn the lesson of overlooking a guy completely and getting getting his ass beat. I don't think he's going to let that happen again. I just don't think that happens. And I do think he is taking this fight serious, because it's like, how dare you? Like, how dare you come into my world and legitimately think you can beat me?
I
Like,
would think the competitor in him must find this mind blowing. Again, I think that the only hope that Jake Paul has is that him being double booked and looking out into the future at Tyson Fury or whoever else, he's going to fight in March. I also don't think we're ever going to see Tyson Fury in a boxing ring again. That's just my personal opinion.
but I think they
Um,
made that fight before the Jake Paul thing came up. Like, this was in the works before Jake Paul. So even if he is looking ahead, he still took this fight
yep,
with that. You know what I'm saying? This wasn't something that came up
yep.
and then he took it. He had already had that going on. So it was like, all right, well, I know that's coming. Let me take this too. You know,
But I think that's his only. I think that's his only hope is that Anthony Joshua age and punishment have caught up to him, and he's not what he once was, and he hasn't fought in a little bit, and he's not thinking about Jake Paul. I think that there is a percentage chance that could happen. It just seems very slim, and there's nothing that Jake Paul has done in a boxing ring that makes me think that he can do anything about it.
what I'll say to this, if we're just talking boxing, strictly boxing, we're taking the spectacle out of it. You look at what Jake Paul does really well, right? It's the right hand. Oh, that's at the end of the day, he's got a halfway decent jab.
He's got a
He's
nice little
been
jab.
he's been respectful, respectfully defensive. You know what I'm saying? Given the opponents that he's fought, right? But when hit back by a real fighter, he's wilted. Tommy Fury, for all that he may or may not be, can hit. When he hit Jake Paul had to give pause. He was like, "Oh shit, I can't bulldoze this guy. He hits really hard." At the end of the Julio Cesar Chavez fight, we were like, "Oh, he's in some trouble." If Julio had done that a couple rounds ago, Jake Paul would have been out of there. You feel me? Um, what's gonna happen when you get hit really hard by one of the hardest hitters in the sport, Anthony Joshua, because it's going to happen. Let's be really clear. You're going to get hit clean by Anthony Joshua. Let's I don't care what kind of defensive guru you bring in there. You're going to get hit clean by this guy. And it's probably going to happen early, right? Don't let him land a body shot early. You're probably not going to get up. It's Those are the things we don't know about Jake Paul, because he hasn't had to face that yet, right? He hasn't been in with a killer at a heavyweight division yet. He's been fighting guys right around 175, 190 ish, right? Who weren't really killers in their day anyway, except for Julio, but Julio waits forever, but before he starts throwing punches. And again, that wasn't just in the Jake Paul fight. Like you said before, that's been his MO his whole career. It's probably the only reason he lost the Sergio fight. He just waited too goddamn long to start throwing punches. So we'll have to see what Jake Paul can take in. Can he survive the first 2 rounds? If he can survive the first 2 rounds, who knows, bro? Who knows? We've seen stranger things in boxing.
And there's plenty of strange things in this beautiful, ugly sport that we love. We got a lot of fights next week. We got fights on Pro Box. We got this fight on Friday. We got 3 different fucking fight cards on the Zone Saturday. But we have run out of time this week. Nibs, tell the people why it's so important to support local boxing.
Look, man, I'm gonna tell you something. I know this is a boxing movie, but I was today years old when I found out that the scene in Rocky where the crowd starts running with him wasn't scripted, right? These were people in Philly who saw a guy running down the damn street throwing punches at himself, and decided to run with him. Look, if that isn't support local boxing, and this guy isn't even a boxer, I don't know what is, right? But the respect, the love for one city and the people who are representing it is infectious, right? And that can lead to a beautiful moment, just like you got in the movie, that was actually real, it was authentic, right? You look at that and you say that probably happens in real life more often than we think it does. And for guys who don't get the Rocky moment, the guys who don't get to the big leagues, but people still support them anyway because why? Because people love to root for the hometown guy. People love to support you. So don't be afraid to say hello to the local bodega owner, the guy who owns the pizzeria down the way, the lady who is a seamstress or owns a beauty salon. Say hello to those people because those are the people that'll support you the best. If speaking to boxers now, don't be afraid to go out into your community and even solicit support from the people that are in it because a lot of times they're just looking for people to support. And I'll leave you with the quote from the famous Rocky. It's not about how hard you get hit. It's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And I think in life, as in boxing, it's always the story.
Beautifully said, as always, my friend. We will be back next week. Enjoy all the fights, guys.